And Then There Were None is considered to be the best-selling mystery novel of all time. It is the brainchild of Agatha Christie. Born Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller in Turkey on 15 September 1890. In addition to the novels and detective stories that have made her famous, there are numerous short stories, plays, and even some romance novels written under the pseudonym Mary Westmacott. She is considered to be one of the most influential and prolific writers of the 20th century and, above all, a world-famous detective novelist. Her works feature recurring characters such as Hercule Poirot, the famous French detective. Another character born from Agatha Christie's pen is Miss Marple. Introduced in the collection Miss Marple and 13 Problems, the character is based on Christie's grandmother and her comrades. To this day, her novels are still successfully published all over the world, and she is the most translated English writer, second only to William Shakespeare. Written by Agatha Christie, the book is set in the first half of the 20th century, in a beautiful villa on a desert island called Nigger Island, changed in the film to Soldier Island. The owners of the villa, Mr. and Mrs. Owen, although they never appear, invite 8 strangers to their home. The guests, some out of need, some out of curiosity, some out of opportunity, have all accepted the invitation and are welcomed into the house by Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, the butler and the cook. So, as protagonists, we find Mr. and Mrs. Rogers, Captain Lombard, former Police Inspector Bloor, Dr. Armstrong, Judge Wargrave, young Vera, elder Emily Brent, veteran MacArthur, and the scion Marston. Arriving at the Owen mansion, the protagonists search the house and settle in the various rooms. In each room, a nursery rhyme for children is hung above the fireplace, reciting the deaths of 10 little Indians. On the table in the central room are 10 small statues. In the evening, the guests gather for dinner. Mr. Owen does not show up, so they decide to wait for him in the dining room. Mr. Rogers, the butler, as ordered by the host, starts a recording accusing each guest of having committed or been an accomplice to a crime. The guests all respond with amazement to these accusations, feeling deeply offended. This is where the extraordinary detective stories begins. On the same evening, 2 guests die a natural death, or so it seems. The curious thing is that they die exactly as the first 2 verses of the nursery rhyme say. The guests realize that something is not right. The murders that follow continue to follow the rhyme of the 10 little Indians, and gradually the statuettes that were on the dining room table disappear along with the victims. For this reason, the last survivors believe that the murderer is hiding among them. The last survivor also hangs herself according to the rhyme. The police investigating the case found themselves at a dead end. The situation is this: a desert island on which there were 10 people and no survivors. At this point, the police believe that there was an 11th person on the island who committed the murders only to disappear into thin air. Except that, one day, a handwritten document is found in a bottle on a fishing boat and is immediately taken to Scotland Yard. The letter belongs to the murderer, who explains how he committed the crimes with the help of an accomplice. The murderer is Judge Wargrave, which is impossible since he was one of the last to die, but not the last. In the letter, he explains how he had always repressed his desire to kill, as his sense of justice was stronger. In the last period of his life, he devoted himself to engineering the perfect crime by condemning to death people who had got away with it despite being guilty. In fact, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers killed their mistress to get their inheritance. Lombard, a former captain guilty of starving 21 natives to death. Bloor, a former police inspector accused of perjury. Dr. Armstrong, who drunkenly kills an old woman during an operation. Judge Wargrave, guilty of condemning a person to death and responsible for the whole Soldier Island staging. Miss Vera, guilty of leaving a child in her care to drown. Emily Brent, an old woman guilty of driving her former housekeeper to suicide. MacArthur, ex-military man who sent his wife's lover off on a pointless mission to die. Young Marston, who runs over two little brothers with his car. The extraordinary thing about this book is that the narrator is an outsider, writing in the third person and an objective observer. She only tells the facts. She, like the reader, knows nothing of what is to come except by going on with the reading. In fact, there are very few clues in the book that help us unravel the mystery. The 2015 television miniseries, And Then There Were None, consist of 3 episodes of 60 minutes each. We can see several differences in the series with the book. Starting from the beginning, the thing that leaves us baffled about this adaptation is the pittiness of the characters and the introduction of scenes that have nothing to do with the story of the book. Like, for instance, the presence of cocaine, parties and sex scenes that apparently in the 21st century should never be missing in TV adaptations. To stay on the subject, the love between Vera and Philip in the book is true and loyal, while in the film we see 2 opportunistic and petty characters, both turning out to be the murderers they are accused of being. Some murders are carried out in different ways. For example, Mr. and Mrs. Rogers suffocate the old lady they were supposed to look after with a pillow, whereas in the book they do not give her medicine and tell the doctor late. The former police inspector Bloor, instead of giving false witness to send an innocent man to prison where he will die, beats an innocent boy to death just because the latter was homosexual and Bloor an homophobic madman. Other deaths also do not faithfully reflect those in the book. But the difference that hurts us most is in the ending. As we said before, at the end of the book, everyone dies and the murderer, Judge Wargrave, is discovered with a letter found in a bottle on a fishing boat, which is taken to the police. In the film, however, the murderer appears in the final scene to deliver his long monologue, where he explains to Vera, the last survivor, why he had planned all this. In the book, Vera hangs herself, frustrated by the guilt and nervous exhaustion caused by that hellish week. In the film, it is Judge Wargrave who moves the chair under Vera's feet after she tries to save her life with lies and flattery. Brilliant little trivia. On the cover of the book, And Then There Were None, in the 2014 Italian reprint, there is a painting by Meredith Frampton called A Game of Patient. The same patient that Judge Wargrave had in committing his crimes.